What if the Aztec Empire had survived? Not unchanged, not frozen in the year 1519, with the same rulers, the same weapons, the same ceremonies, and the same political order preserved beneath glass for 500 years. No civilization survives that way. Rome did not. China did not. France did not. Japan did not. Every society that lasts does so by becoming something its founders would only partly recognize. So imagine something more difficult and more interesting. Imagine that the political world centered on Tenochtitlan survives the arrival of the Spanish, survives the epidemics that follow, survives the age of gunpowder empires, survives Atlantic trade, industrialization, nationalism, and the modern world. Imagine that somewhere inside the enormous Mexico City basin of our own century, there is still a capital called Tenochtitlan, not an archaeological memory beneath another city, but a living metropolis whose streets, canals, languages, institutions, and arguments have been changing continuously for more than 700 years. Tonight, let your body settle into wherever you're resting. Let the weight of the day loosen a little, and let's travel, gently, to a city that almost existed. It is early morning in the year 2026. Mist lies low over Lake Texcoco, not the vast lake the Mexican knew in the 15th century. Centuries of engineering, population growth, drought, flooding, and reclamation have changed its shape. But the water never disappeared completely. Broad channels still divide districts of the capital. Electric ferries move quietly between stations. Long green belts of Chinampa agriculture survive to the south and east, protected now by law and by centuries of practical experience with the consequences of trying to dominate a lake too completely. A commuter train crosses one of the old causeway corridors toward the city center. Its announcements are made first in Nahuatl, then in Spanish, then in English. Office towers rise behind older stone precincts. A university observatory stands near a temple complex that has been rebuilt, expanded, damaged, debated, and rebuilt again across 5 centuries. Christian churches exist here too, along with secular civic buildings, mosques, synagogues, and temples belonging to religious traditions that would have been incomprehensible to the people who first founded the island city. Nothing about this place is pure. Nothing about it is unchanged. That is precisely why it survived. A young archivist named Seatlali steps off the train carrying a sealed case no larger than a laptop. Inside is a sheet of a matted paper, brittle now, covered with pictorial signs and later annotations written in several alphabets. The document is famous. School children know its name, the Agreement of the Four Roads. It was written, in this imagined history, in early 1522, after the failed attempt to conquer the city. And if we want to understand how the Aztec Empire could possibly still exist 500 years later, we have to begin with the strange truth that it could only survive by stopping itself from being the empire it had been. Travel back with me now, back through electric trains and steel bridges, back through printed books and steam engines, back through muskets, horses, ocean-going ships, and diseases no healer in the Valley of Mexico had ever seen. Back to a city standing in water beneath a high, clear sky. In 1519, Tenochtitlan is one of the great cities of the world. It sits on islands in Lake Texcoco, linked to surrounding shores by causeways. Canals carry people and goods through neighborhoods. Aqueducts bring fresh water. Markets connect farmers, craftspeople, merchants, soldiers, nobles, and tributary communities across an enormous economic network. To call this entire world simply the Aztec Empire hides some of its most important structure. The dominant power is the triple alliance of Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan. Tenochtitlan has become increasingly dominant, but the empire is not a modern nation-state with one uniform administration covering every village. It is a patchwork of cities and territories linked by conquest, tribute, diplomacy, local rulers, trade, fear, obligation, and opportunity. Many conquered communities keep their own leaders as long as tribute arrives. That flexibility helps the empire expand quickly. It also creates one of its greatest weaknesses. Some communities have reasons to hate Tenochtitlan. Others have reasons simply to fear it. Still others are willing to cooperate when doing so is useful and resist when it is not. Outside the imperial structure are powerful independent rivals, including Tlaxcala to the east and the Puripeka state to the west. The Mexica have enemies who understand their roads, their politics, their military habits, and their tributary system far better than any Spaniard possibly could. This matters because Hernán Cortés does not conquer central Mexico with a few hundred Europeans acting alone. The Spanish bring steel weapons, crossbows, firearms, horses, maritime connections, and a willingness to exploit every political division they encounter. But their most important military strength eventually becomes indigenous. Totonac communities, Tlaxcalans, and others enter into shifting alliances with the newcomers for their own reasons. Some want freedom from Mexica demands. Some see a temporary partner against an old enemy. Some are making the best decision they can inside a rapidly changing and dangerous world. The conquest is therefore not a simple contest between Spaniards and Aztecs. It becomes a Mesoamerican war transformed by a small but disruptive foreign force. And then disease enters the story. Smallpox adds a force no army can command. The population of central Mexico has no previous history with the virus. People become sick in enormous numbers. Households lose caregivers. Political leaders die. Farmers, warriors, porters, artisans, merchants, priests, and children die. The disease does not ask which side they support. In our history, the epidemic becomes one of several forces tearing apart Mexican resistance before the final fall of Tenochtitlan in August 1521. Our alternate history cannot simply wish smallpox away. If the empire survives only because European pathogens somehow become harmless, we have stopped asking an interesting historical question and started inventing a magical shield. So the epidemic still comes. It is still catastrophic. The difference begins somewhere else. The Spanish have already been driven from Tenochtitlan once. During the violent retreat traditionally remembered in Spanish accounts as La Noche Triste, or the Night of Sorrows, Cortés and surviving followers escaped the island city at enormous cost. In our timeline, they regroup, strengthen alliances, construct brigantines, return, cut the city off, and eventually destroy its ability to resist. In our alternate timeline, the rulers of Tenochtitlan draw a different lesson from that first victory. They do not conclude that the foreigners are weak. They conclude that the empire is. Not because its warriors lack courage, because too many neighboring peoples are willing to help destroy it. The revelation is frightening precisely because it is true. Imagine the council chambers during the last months of 1520. Outside, sickness moves from household to household. Inside, surviving leaders debate what can still be saved. The old answer would be tribute, punishment, and military mobilization. The new answer begins with a question that sounds almost like surrender. What if the tributaries stop being tributaries? Not all at once. Not from sudden generosity. Empires rarely become gentle because rulers discover philosophy in the middle of a war. The reform begins because survival demands it. Envoys travel east. They carry offers that would have seemed humiliating a year earlier. Reduced tribute. Recognition of local rulers. Hostages returned. Access to markets without the old obligations. A promise that military forces from Tenochtitlan will not enter certain allied territories without permission. Most importantly, they carry a proposal for a defensive league against any foreign army attempting to rule central Mexico. The first responses are hostile. Why trust Tenochtitlan now? Where was this generosity when tribute collectors arrived? Why should Tlaxcala rescue an enemy that spent decades trying to isolate it? These objections do not disappear because history needs a convenient alliance. The negotiations almost fail, but Cortés has created his own problem. His indigenous allies are discovering that Spanish victory might not mean a simple return to local independence. Spanish officers demand provisions. They claim land. They make increasingly obvious statements about the authority of a distant king. Priests speak of destroying temples. Rumors spread from the Caribbean of peoples who helped Europeans and then discovered that alliance had become subordination. None of this makes former Mexica enemies suddenly love Tenochtitlan. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is enough. In our imagined history, the crucial fracture comes not when Tlaxcala joins the Mexica, but when part of the anti-Mexica coalition refuses to continue providing Cortés with unlimited manpower and supplies. Some Tlaxcalan leaders remain committed to destroying Tenochtitlan. Others decide that a weakened Mexica state, bound by treaty and surrounded by independent neighbors, may be less dangerous than a foreign monarchy with access to an ocean. Texcoco becomes the second critical point. In real history, political divisions there became enormously important to Cortés. In our timeline, the faction supporting the Spanish fails to secure enough control. Rival leaders, seeing the promises being offered elsewhere, negotiate instead for greater autonomy inside a reconstructed alliance. The siege plan for 1521 does not disappear. It becomes unstable before it begins. Spanish brigantines still enter the lake. Gunpowder still kills. Smallpox still empties homes. But the thousands of indigenous fighters and porters required to isolate Tenochtitlan are no longer arriving in the same numbers. Supply lines are attacked. Communities that had promised food begin withholding it. The brigantine campaign now suffers from the same political fracture. Building, transporting, launching, crewing, supplying, and repairing the vessels depends on large amounts of local labor and secure movement through Allied territory. With fewer porters, builders, guides, and fighters available, some vessels reach the lake late. Others lack the support needed to operate continuously, and damaged craft are harder to replace. One causeway assault succeeds, and then collapses when Allied contingents refuse to follow the Spanish into a killing ground. Cortés understands something before many of his enemies do. He can win battles. He cannot hold central Mexico without a durable indigenous coalition. By late 1521, his army retreats eastward. Not destroyed, not defeated forever, simply unable to conquer Tenochtitlan this time. The city survives. Barely. There is no triumphal celebration like the ones poets will later invent. The streets smell of smoke and sickness. Canals contain wreckage. The dead are everywhere. The political order that existed when Cortés first arrived is already gone, even though the capital still stands. This is where our alternate history truly begins. Because defeating one expedition is easy compared with surviving the century that follows. Spain now knows what exists beyond the Gulf Coast. It knows there are wealthy cities, enormous populations, organized states, productive farmland, trade networks, and precious goods. More ships will come. More diseases will come too. The Mexica cannot unlearn that. And so, during the winter of 1521 to 1522, after the failed siege, representatives from Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, Tlacopan, Tlaxcala, Huexinco, several former tributary cities, and other regional powers gather for negotiations that last months. They meet because none of them has enough strength to guarantee the future alone. The result is our fictional agreement of the Four Roads. It does not create democracy. It does not erase old hatreds. It does not abolish war. What it does is stranger. It turns the survival of Tenochtitlan into something larger than the survival of Mexica's supremacy. Tribute becomes negotiated taxation in participating cities. Military obligations require council approval. Member states keep their own rulers and internal laws. Tenochtitlan remains the richest and most influential city, but it loses the unquestioned right to command everyone around it. Tlaxcala remains formally independent, yet joins the Defense Compact. Texcoco regains political weight. The Triple Alliance has not exactly survived. It has mutated. In later centuries, historians will argue about the date the Aztec Empire actually ended. Some say 1521, even in this alternate world, because the old tribute empire never truly returns. Others insist that an empire can change institutions without losing continuity. Citlali, our archivist in 2026, belongs to the second school. She looks at the 500-year-old agreement and sees not the death certificate of an empire, but its first successful act of adaptation. And that adaptation has arrived just in time, because the next enemy cannot be negotiated with. The next enemy is microscopic. The epidemics of the 16th century do not become gentle just because the siege fails. Smallpox is followed, in our imagined history as in real colonial history, by other waves of disease. Measles, influenza, and additional epidemics move through communities whose populations have been isolated from Old World pathogens for thousands of years. The exact sequence would differ because colonial labor systems, forced migrations, famine, and war also shaped real mortality. But political independence does not provide biological immunity. This distinction matters. A surviving Aztec state is not a civilization spared the demographic catastrophe of contact. It is a civilization forced to survive through it without being politically conquered at the same time. The difference is enormous, but it is not miraculous. Imagine Tenochtitlan in the 1530s. Neighborhoods that once crowded the islands now contain empty houses. Entire lineages have lost elders. Skilled craftspeople vanish faster than apprentices can replace them. Fields go unworked because labor is missing. Priests struggle to explain why rituals have not protected families. Rulers discover that tax demands written for a world of abundant population are impossible in a world where villages may have lost a terrifying share of their people. The Agreement of the Four Roads, created as wartime diplomacy, becomes a framework for emergency survival. Taxes are suspended in the worst-hit communities. Food shipments are redirected towards cities experiencing epidemic peaks. Merchant routes become channels for information as well as goods. Local healers compare observations. Some treatments are useless. Some are harmful. Some provide comfort without changing the disease. But one practical lesson becomes impossible to ignore. Separating the sick from the well sometimes changes how quickly illness spreads. No one yet understands viruses. Europeans do not understand viruses either. But societies can learn patterns long before they understand mechanisms. Ports begin holding arriving crews outside major towns for periods of observation. Markets create temporary spaces for traders from regions reporting outbreaks. Messengers carry warnings ahead of caravans. Households mark illness. Communities debate whether isolation is protection or abandonment. None of this prevents repeated epidemics. It does something subtler. It turns public health into a political problem the state must address. That matters for the next European expedition. Spain does return. Of course it does. The idea that one failed conquest would convince the Spanish monarchy to forget Central Mexico is difficult to sustain. The Caribbean already provides basis. Spanish interests are expanding across the mainland. News of gold, markets, and large states does not become less attractive after Cortés fails. So ships return to the Gulf Coast. Some bring soldiers. Others bring priests, merchants, translators, artisans, fugitives, diplomats, and people who are difficult to place neatly in any category. The coastal world becomes the great pressure zone of our alternate century. Spanish enclaves appear. Some are destroyed. Some survive through treaty. Some change rulers repeatedly. Totonac cities bargain between inland alliances and maritime powers. Smuggling becomes ordinary. European goods move west even when formal trade is prohibited. Indigenous goods move east toward ships regardless of what either government says. And technology begins crossing political boundaries faster than armies. A captured arquebus is not useful simply because someone possesses it. Gunpowder requires ingredients in appropriate proportions. Firearms require metalworking, boring, casting, repair, springs, stocks, ammunition, and training. Horses require breeding, pasture, veterinary knowledge, saddles, and riders who learn what the animal can and cannot do. The Mexica cannot simply pick up a musket and become European soldiers. They do not need to. They need to learn. That learning begins unevenly. Some military leaders resist foreign weapons because they are slow, smoky, expensive, and unreliable in wet conditions. Obsidian-edged weapons remain brutally effective at close range. Bows and atlatls remain useful. Fortifications designed for older styles of warfare do not disappear overnight. Other leaders understand that gunpowder has an advantage larger than any single weapon. It can be copied. Artisans from the Puripeka world become especially important in this imagined exchange. West Mexico already has strong metalworking traditions. The Puripeka have remained outside Mexico rule and have repeatedly resisted Mexico expansion. They are not naturally waiting to help Tenochtitlan, but they also face the same new maritime powers. Trade grows where conquest failed. Copper-working knowledge from Western Mexico meets captured European iron and steel tools. Foreign smiths are hired, bribed, kidnapped, or persuaded to remain. Workshops experiment. Early products are poor. Barrels burst. Locks fail. Powder gets wet. Horses die from bad handling. Then the failures become knowledge. By the middle of the 16th century, Central Mexican armies in our alternate world no longer look like the armies Cortés encountered. They do not look Spanish either. They are hybrids, Nahuatl and lance, bow and arquebus, cotton armor, and increasing use of metal protection, canoes and gunboats, runners carrying messages alongside mounted couriers. War changes because survival requires it. Writing changes too. Before contact, Mesoamerica already contains long traditions of recording history, tribute, genealogy, ritual, astronomy, and political memory through pictorial and glyphic systems. The Maya developed a highly complex writing system centuries earlier. Central Mexican manuscripts use different conventions, combining images, signs, names, numbers, places, and oral interpretation. Then alphabetic writing arrives. In our real history, Nahuatl written in the Latin alphabet becomes one of the great documentary traditions of colonial America. Indigenous writers use the imported alphabet to record local histories, petitions, land claims, religious texts, poetry, and everyday administration. In our alternate history, something similar happens without Spanish political domination. The alphabet enters through interpreters, merchants, captive soldiers, priests permitted to operate in certain districts, and indigenous diplomats who understand that foreign documents contain power. A generation of scribes learns to write Nahuatl phonetically with Roman letters while continuing older pictorial traditions. For a while, the two systems sit beside each other on the same page. A place name appears as a painted glyph and then again in alphabetic text. A tribute count appears in traditional notation beside a written legal clause. A ruler's genealogy is painted in one column and explained in prose in another. The result is not the disappearance of indigenous record-keeping. It is an explosion of forms. The Agreement of the Four Roads becomes one of the first famous documents repeatedly recopied in both systems. This is how Seat Lally can read it 5 centuries later. Printing arrives next. Not immediately. A printing press is not just a clever machine. It requires movable type, metal, ink, paper, skilled operators, and a market large enough to justify the effort. In our history, the first printing press in the Americas was established in Mexico City in the 16th century under Spanish rule. In this alternate world, an independent Tenochtitlan still has every reason to want the technology. The first presses are imported under tight controls. Then local workshops copy them. Nahuatl type becomes standardized enough for administration, although spellings remain contested. Books appear in multiple languages. Treaties are printed. Calendrical tables are printed. Medical observations are printed. Religious polemics are printed with such enthusiasm that rulers soon discover the technology can spread political trouble as efficiently as official decrees. The old Kalmakak and Telpakali educational traditions evolve under the pressure. Elite schools expand their curricula to include European languages, geometry, navigation, gunpowder mathematics, foreign law, and diplomacy. Merchant families demand education for sons who will negotiate across oceans. Some daughters of elite and merchant households receive increasingly formal instruction because literacy has become economically valuable beyond priestly or noble careers. This change is uneven and contested. It does not create universal education in 1550. It creates a society in which literacy has acquired a new strategic meaning. If you cannot read the treaty a foreign captain puts in front of you, someone else will explain it for you. That lesson has become too expensive to forget. Religion becomes an even more difficult question. The Mexican state religion is not a decorative layer placed over politics. Ritual, warfare, agriculture, rulership, calendrical cycles, and cosmology are deeply connected. Human sacrifice exists within that system and cannot honestly be erased from the historical picture because it makes modern listeners uncomfortable. Nor should it be used as a lazy explanation for conquest, as though European empires arrived without forms of spectacular violence of their own. In our alternate history, human sacrifice becomes one of the most divisive institutions of the surviving state. The epidemics create a theological crisis. Why did so many offerings fail to stop disease? Why do foreign Christians survive some outbreaks and die in others? Why do communities that sacrifice differently suffer too? There is no single response. Traditionalists argue that catastrophe proves the gods require even greater devotion. Others argue that the old rituals were designed for an older political world, not for a federation struggling to hold together former enemies. Tlaxcalan participation in the Defensive League makes the question political as well as religious. So does the growing presence of Christian merchants and diplomats. So does the practical problem of maintaining a federation when member cities reject one another's ritual authority. Reform, therefore, begins not with a modern declaration of human rights, but with jurisdiction. Member states gain greater control over ritual practice. Captives taken in wars between League members can no longer be sacrificed by the victorious city because those wars themselves are increasingly restricted. Large state ceremonies shift toward animal offerings, bloodletting, food, flowers, incense, symbolic warfare, and public redistribution. Human sacrifice does not vanish in one decree. It declines over generations. By the early 17th century, it has become rare, politically toxic, and increasingly illegal in the Central Federation, though reports of the practice continue in frontier regions and during periods of reaction. Later historians argue endlessly over why it ended. Religious evolution? Diplomacy? Demographic collapse? Foreign pressure? Internal moral debate? The answer, as usual, is all of them in different proportions. Christianity also changes in contact with this independent world. Missionaries cannot rely on a colonial government to destroy temples and compel mass conversion. Some are expelled. Some are tolerated. Some become respected physicians or linguists. Some provoke riots. Some indigenous converts form communities that remain politically loyal to the Federation while rejecting traditional religion. Over time, Christianity becomes one religion among several rather than the official faith of a conquered colony. Syncretic traditions emerge anyway. They always do when people live together long enough. Saints acquire local associations. Indigenous festivals borrow foreign instruments. Christian artists use Mesoamerican imagery. Traditional poets adopt European forms. Theology travels in both directions. By 1600, no one could mistake Tenochtitlan for the city Cortés first entered. Its population is still recovering from epidemics. Its political system is more federal. Its armies use gunpowder. Its scribes use alphabets as well as pictorial manuscripts. Its markets contain horses, cattle, sheep, steel tools, glass, foreign cloth, and imported books alongside maize, cacao, cotton, obsidian, feathers, ceramics, and goods moving through older Mesoamerican networks. Its priests now share the city with Christian clergy and with skeptics who have discovered that printing presses are difficult to police. And its rulers face a new problem. They have learned how to survive Europeans arriving in Mexico. Now they have to survive Mexico becoming part of the Atlantic world. The Atlantic does not ask whether Tenochtitlan wants to join it. Ships have already connected the Caribbean to Europe and Africa. Silver, sugar, enslaved labor, weapons, textiles, books, animals, plants, and pathogens are moving through routes that become larger every decade. A surviving central Mexican state can try to regulate those currents. It cannot pretend they do not exist. This changes the coast first. Veracruz in our own history becomes a principal port of New Spain. In this alternate world, the Gulf Coast is politically fragmented for much longer. Spain holds some fortified ports and loses others. Totonac polities negotiate trade concessions. Independent merchants discover that a royal monopoly is mostly a challenge to smuggling. French and later Dutch ships appear whenever war in Europe makes Spanish enforcement weaker. Tenochtitlan's leaders publicly condemn unauthorized trade. Privately, they buy cannon. The contradiction becomes normal. By the early 17th century, foreign merchant houses operate under license in several inland markets. They are required to use local brokers. They pay heavy customs duties. They complain constantly. The government complains about them too and renews their licenses anyway. Cacao, cochineal dye, cotton textiles, medicinal plants, ceramics, feathers, and crafted luxury goods move outward. Iron tools, books, glass, weapons, cloth, livestock, navigational instruments, and unfamiliar foods move inward. The exchange changes landscapes as much as markets. Cattle and sheep do not fit neatly into every Mesoamerican agricultural system. Grazing animals can damage fields and compete for land. Horses require pasture. Old farming patterns adapt. Some communities adopt livestock enthusiastically because animal traction and transport are useful. Others resist because herds destroy carefully managed land. New crops arrive too. Wheat grows in suitable highland zones. Orchard species spread. Sugar becomes profitable in warmer regions and politically dangerous because large estates demand land and labor. The Federation discovers a truth that will follow it for centuries. Surviving conquest does not automatically prevent exploitation. Local elites are perfectly capable of exploiting people without foreign governors. Merchant families accumulate wealth through Atlantic trade. Noble houses convert old tribute privileges into land claims. Military commanders receive frontier estates. Communities weakened by epidemics sometimes lose control of fields because they no longer have enough people to defend legal boundaries. The first great political crisis of the 17th century therefore has nothing to do with Spain. It begins with land. A generation has grown up that remembers the agreement of the Four Roads not as an emergency compromise, but as constitutional tradition. Lawyers cite it. Local councils cite it. Merchants cite it whenever useful and ignore it when inconvenient. Villages begin bringing cases against nobles who claim lands once held communally. The courts are overwhelmed. Some judges are bribed. Some decisions are enforced. Others are not. In 1634, in our imagined timeline, a dispute over grazing rights south of the lake becomes violent. Soldiers sent to restore order side with the landholder who pays them. Several villagers are killed. News spreads through printed broadsheets before the government can control the story. The scandal changes the meaning of the old federation. For the first time, the Central Council declares that communities can appeal directly against local nobles and officials. It creates professional land surveyors. Maps become legal weapons. Older pictorial boundary documents are copied into alphabetic records and stored in regional archives. Some communal land survives because paper now speaks almost as loudly as ancestry. Some is still lost. No legal reform creates justice everywhere, but the state becomes more bureaucratic. The transformation is easy to miss because it does not look dramatic. There is no battle. No emperor falls. People simply begin needing documents for things their grandparents negotiated face to face. The same slow institutional change happens around the lake. Tenochtitlan was built in a difficult environment long before Europeans arrived. Fresh water had to be brought across the lake. Causeways had to control movement. Dikes helped separate waters of different salinity and manage flooding. Chinampas turned shallow lake zones into highly productive agricultural landscapes through human-made fields separated by canals. They were not gardens floating freely on water. They were constructed landscapes anchored in shallow lake beds, maintained through dredged sediment, vegetation, canals, labor, and constant knowledge of water. In our alternate world, this becomes one of the most important reasons Tenochtitlan looks different in 2026. The city never experiences the same colonial drive to remake the lake basin exactly as Mexico City did in our history. That does not mean the lakes remain untouched. A growing capital still wants dry land. Merchants want warehouses. Officials want roads. Residents want protection from floods. Engineers argue for canals, dikes, pumping, drainage, and reclamation. Some districts are filled. Some wetlands disappear. The lake shrinks. But Chinampa farmers possess political power they did not have under a colonial city government. Their produce feeds the capital. Their water knowledge matters during floods. Their communities have old legal claims recorded in the post-1521 reforms. Every proposal to drain another section of shallow lake, therefore, becomes a fight. The fights are repetitive, technical, and enormously consequential. A famous flood in 1648 nearly wins the argument for large-scale drainage. Water remains in central districts for months. Merchants lose warehouses. Disease spreads through crowded neighborhoods. Engineers propose cutting a massive outlet through the basin and lowering the lake permanently. Chinampa communities respond that drainage will solve one danger by creating another. They point to sinking soils, disappearing wetlands, and the loss of food-producing landscapes. They do not possess modern hydrology. They possess centuries of local experience. The compromise is imperfect. Major flood control channels are built. Dikes are raised. Some lake sections are reclaimed. But the Federation rejects complete drainage. The decision becomes one of those ordinary administrative choices that transforms an alternate world more profoundly than any victorious battle. Centuries later, modern Tenochtitlan still has serious water problems. It still floods in extreme storms. It still struggles with pollution, groundwater demand, and subsidence in reclaimed districts. But it also retains a larger connected system of wetlands and canals than modern Mexico City does in our reality. The Chinampa Zone becomes not a romantic survival from the past, but a working part of metropolitan food, flood management, biodiversity, and cultural identity. That continuity affects science. Not because Aztec astronomers somehow jumped directly from calendrical observation to modern astrophysics. That would misunderstand how science develops. Knowledge advances when instruments, mathematics, institutions, communication, and criticism reinforce one another. Mesoamerican scholars already possess sophisticated calendrical traditions and centuries of astronomical observation when Europeans arrive. European astronomy brings its own long history, along with new tables, instruments, mathematical techniques, and eventually telescopes. The interesting question is not which tradition was more advanced. It is what happens when neither one is politically erased. In the 1600s, calendrical specialists in Tenochtitlan begin comparing local records with European astronomical tables. Disagreements become valuable. An eclipse predicted slightly differently by two systems produces public debate. Navigators need more precise longitude and latitude estimates. Surveyors need geometry. Merchants want reliable calendars for shipping and contracts. A state observatory emerges from practical needs long before anyone calls the work modern science. European instruments are copied locally. Foreign books are translated. Nahuatl technical vocabulary expands. Latin terms enter it. So do Spanish ones. Older Mesoamerican concepts remain wherever they continue to be useful. By the late 17th century, the capital scholars are arguing over the work of Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, Kepler, and Galileo. Some accept heliocentric models quickly. Others do not. Religious authorities object for reasons that are not identical to European objections, because their cosmology is different. The debate is not a simple triumph of reason over tradition. It is a local argument about foreign evidence, old calendars, sacred meaning, and the growing authority of mathematical prediction. Medicine follows a similar path. Indigenous herbal knowledge does not disappear into a colonial archive and become disconnected from the communities that produced it. It remains part of living medical practice. European pharmacology enters beside it. Anatomical texts arrive. Surgical techniques circulate. So do false theories. The four-humor model is not automatically better than every indigenous explanation simply because it comes from Europe. Local physicians compare outcomes. They keep records because epidemics have taught the political class that memory can save lives. In the 18th century, smallpox becomes the center of another transformation. Long before modern vaccination, people in several parts of the world use forms of variolation, deliberately exposing individuals to smallpox material in hopes of producing a milder infection and later protection. The practice carries real danger, but information about it travels widely. In our alternate Tenochtitlan, reports arrive through Atlantic medical networks. The proposal is horrifying. Deliberately give a healthy child material from a smallpox case? The first public trials provoke fierce opposition. Some physicians condemn them. Some priests condemn them for entirely different reasons. Families who remember generations of epidemic death are willing to try. Records are kept. Mortality among inoculated groups is compared with mortality during outbreaks. Arguments become quantitative. By the time safer vaccination methods spread at the end of the 18th and beginning of the 19th centuries, the Federation already possesses institutions capable of organizing large public campaigns. This does not mean disease has stopped shaping society. It means disease has helped create a state that thinks of health as collective infrastructure. And that state is becoming wealthier. The reason worries almost everyone. Atlantic commerce is growing faster than the old political system can regulate it. A class of merchants now has money comparable to noble families. Foreign powers offer loans. Military modernization costs more every decade. Ports demand autonomy because they generate customs revenue. The inland capital demands control because it pays for defense. Tlaxcala asks why it should finance naval projects protecting merchants in cities that once demanded tribute from its ancestors. Purapeca diplomats watch the arguments with satisfaction and concern. The Federation has survived Spain. It has survived epidemics. It may yet be broken by accountants. The constitutional crisis begins in the language of money and becomes a debate about what the state actually is. By the early 18th century, the old title of Huitzilopochtli still exists in Tenochtitlan. The office carries enormous prestige. Ceremonial authority, diplomatic leadership, and certain military powers remain attached to it. Yet the office no longer rules an unquestioned tribute empire. Regional councils have acquired rights. Merchant guilds finance public works. Military commanders answer to multi-city institutions. Courts cite agreements written nearly 2 centuries earlier. The ruler is powerful, but power has accumulated around him rather than solely beneath him. This arrangement works until a ruler tries to reverse it. In our imaginary 1712, Huitzilopochtli II inherits a treasury weakened by a costly naval war in the Gulf. Foreign creditors are demanding payment. Port cities refuse new taxes. Several nobles argue that the answer is simple: restore direct tribute over provinces that have enjoyed too much autonomy for too long. The proposal is politically explosive. Supporters call it restoration. Opponents call it the return of the old empire. Tlaxcala threatens to leave the defensive league. Texcoco refuses to provide troops for tax enforcement. Printers in Tenochtitlan produce anonymous pamphlets claiming that the agreement of the Four Roads limits the ruler's power. The palace responds by closing presses. Within weeks, handwritten copies circulate instead. The crisis lasts 2 years. There are riots, arrests, and several brief armed confrontations. A general from the eastern provinces refuses a direct order to march on Tlaxcala. Rather than beginning a civil war, the Central Council negotiates what later historians call the Second Compact. The Huitzilopochtli retains the throne, but taxation must be approved by a representative assembly of member states. The office loses the unilateral right to wage offensive war. Courts gain formal independence from palace administrators. The old imperial title survives while the state beneath it becomes something closer to a constitutional federation. Again, survival comes through mutation. A European traveler arriving in 1730 would find the political vocabulary confusing. Is this a monarchy? A republic? An empire? A confederation? The answer depends on which institution he is standing in front of. Tenochtitlan still uses imperial ceremony. Tlaxcala guards its republican traditions. Texcoco maintains noble houses with ancient claims. Merchant ports elect councils. Some rural communities operate through local assemblies that predate European contact. The Federation contains all of them. This complexity slows decisions. It also makes conquest more difficult. There is no single palace whose capture automatically transfers authority over the whole state. European diplomats learn this with frustration. So do local rulers. By now, Spain's position in the Americas is very different from the one we know. Without control of central Mexico, the Spanish monarchy loses access to one of the great centers of population, agriculture, taxation, and later silver production that strengthened New Spain in our history. Spain still possesses Caribbean colonies and still conquers large parts of the Americas. The Inca world faces its own catastrophic encounter with Pizarro and his allies. Spanish America still exists, but there is no New Spain stretching across the same territory with Mexico City as its administrative heart. The consequences ripple outward. The Spanish crown has less revenue from central Mexico. Its ability to project power across the Pacific is reduced. The famous Manila galleon system may still emerge through other ports, but it is smaller and politically more complicated without Acapulco and central Mexico, securely integrated into the Spanish imperial network. Other European powers see opportunity. France establishes stronger commercial ties along parts of the Gulf. Dutch merchants enter whenever Spanish wars open a gap. English traders arrive through Caribbean networks. None of these powers behaves altruistically. Each would prefer trade on favorable terms and territorial influence where possible. The surviving Mesoamerican states learn the European balance of power game because refusing to learn it would be dangerous. One decade, they buy artillery from the Dutch to discourage Spain. Another decade, they sign a treaty with Spain to limit English privateers. A French engineering mission improves fortifications and then spends years accused of stealing military maps. Diplomacy becomes a profession. So does espionage. This changes language inside the Federation. Nahuatl remains the principal political language of the capital and becomes standardized through printing and administration. It is not the only indigenous language. Mesoamerica is linguistically diverse, and a surviving state cannot turn that diversity into one convenient national tongue without creating resistance. Regional languages remain strong. Spanish becomes a major trade and diplomatic language without replacing Nahuatl. French and English are taught in elite commercial schools. By 1750, educated officials in the capital often move between 3 or 4 languages in a working day. The linguistic consequences reach ordinary life more slowly. Spanish loanwords enter Nahuatl for imported animals, technologies, legal ideas, and foods. Nahuatl words move outward too. Cacao, tomato, chili, avocado, and other American products travel with indigenous and Spanish names through international commerce. European visitors complain that official documents use concepts with no clean translation into their legal vocabulary. Local scholars enjoy the difficulty. The 18th century brings another kind of challenge: new political philosophy. European books on natural rights, sovereignty, constitutional government, and political economy circulate through the Federation. They arrive in a society that already has its own traditions of council government, hereditary rulership, communal landholding, imperial tribute, merchant power, and treaty federalism. The result is not simple imitation. A Nahuatl political writer in 1768 translates a French text on sovereignty and adds a long commentary arguing that the author misunderstands the obligations between an altepetl and its people. Another writer uses the Agreement of the Four Roads to claim that political authority originates in negotiated obligations rather than conquest. A conservative noble replies that this is historical nonsense invented by merchants who want lower taxes. Students debate both in public courtyards. The old empire has become capable of arguing with itself in print. That may be one of the most important differences in the entire alternate history. When a civilization survives, its old texts do not become automatically sacred. They become available to be criticized by descendants. The same is happening to religion. By the late 18th century, traditional Mexican religious institutions still exist, but ritual life has changed beyond recognition from the 16th century. Human sacrifice has been prohibited for generations in the core federation. Animal offerings, flowers, incense, fasting, bloodletting by willing participants, music, dance, pilgrimage, and calendrical festivals remain. Christianity has grown substantially, especially in ports and commercial cities. Some noble families convert. Some communities blend Christian and older Mesoamerican practices so thoroughly that theologians on both sides insist the result is unacceptable. Secular intellectuals appear too. They are a small minority at first and an irritatingly vocal one. A modern listener might be tempted to ask which religion wins. That is the wrong question. The more plausible outcome is pluralism produced by political necessity before it becomes a moral principle. The Federation has spent 2 centuries learning that religious uniformity is expensive to enforce across autonomous member states. Tolerance begins as exhaustion. Later generations turn it into law. Art changes in the same layered way. Featherworkers use imported silk beside local feathers. Metalworkers combine older casting traditions with European tools. Painters experiment with oil while continuing manuscript painting. Architects add arches, domes, and iron structural elements to building traditions organized around courtyards, platforms, plazas, and monumental stone. Music changes rapidly because instruments travel well. String instruments become part of local performance. European visitors hear melodies they recognize played inside rhythmic and ceremonial structures they do not. Foreign styles are adopted, resisted, mocked, and transformed. No cultural border remains clean for 500 years. The same is true of food. Maize remains central. Beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, amaranth, cacao, and other long-established foods continue shaping cuisine. Wheat becomes important without replacing maize. Pigs, cattle, sheep, chickens, dairy products, and new fruits enter regional diets. Sugar spreads rapidly enough for physicians to begin complaining about it long before anyone understands metabolic disease. By 1800, a meal in Tenochtitlan would look both familiar and impossible to a cook from 1500. Then the Atlantic world's political order begins breaking apart. Revolutions in North America, France, Haiti, and later Spanish America force every government to confront ideas that were easier to discuss when they belonged to other countries. The United States declares independence to the north and east of the continent. France tears apart its monarchy. Enslaved people in Saint-Domingue overthrow one of the Atlantic world's richest plantation systems and establish Haiti. Spanish colonies begin questioning imperial rule. The Mesoamerican Federation is already independent. That does not protect it from revolution. In fact, it creates a particularly uncomfortable question. Independent from whom? A farmer in a provincial valley may never have been ruled by Spain and still owe taxes to a local noble family whose privilege is centuries old. A merchant can celebrate resistance to European empire while owning debt labor contracts that bind workers for years. A ruler can praise indigenous sovereignty while denying women formal political authority. A city can remember the defeat of Cortés while sending soldiers to suppress another indigenous community at the frontier. Survival has preserved institutions that deserve preserving. It has also preserved inequalities that conquest might otherwise have destroyed or transformed. This is the moral complication the alternate world cannot escape. History does not divide neatly into indigenous virtue and European vice. The Spanish conquest involved extraordinary violence, exploitation, coercion, and cultural destruction. The Mexican state also used conquest, tribute, hierarchy, and ritual violence. A surviving polity would inherit both its creativity and its capacity for domination. In 1811, that contradiction finally explodes. The immediate cause is a tax on commercial transport. The deeper cause is representation. Provincial towns argue that Tenochtitlan and a few wealthy lake cities dominate the federal assembly. Rural communities demand direct seats. Merchant guilds demand voting rights independent of hereditary status. Urban craft associations demand the same. Christian minorities want explicit religious equality. Traditional nobles insist that dismantling hereditary offices will destroy the political continuity that allowed the state to survive. Protests spread. The palace tries to compromise and satisfies no one. For 3 years, the Federation approaches civil war. Then an event outside its borders changes the calculation. Spanish colonial authority across much of the hemisphere is collapsing. New republics are emerging. European powers are watching. Every faction inside Anahuac understands that civil war could invite foreign intervention. The Third Compact of 1815 becomes the most radical political transformation since 1521. The dynastic office of Huey-Telatoni remains as a ceremonial head of state, with succession regulated by constitutional rules, while executive authority moves to an elected federal council. Representation expands beyond noble and city elites. Hereditary legal privileges are sharply reduced. Religious equality becomes constitutional law. Debt bondage is restricted and then abolished over the following decades. Communal land receives federal protection, although enforcement remains uneven. Women do not yet receive equal political rights. That battle will come later. The official name of the state changes too. Foreigners keep calling it the Aztec Empire because old names are difficult to kill. Its own constitution uses a different name, the Federation of Anahuac. The word refers broadly to the central Mexican world rather than to one ruling people. Some Mexica traditionalists hate the change. Some former tributary regions consider it overdue by 3 centuries. Citlali, reading the documents in 2026, smiles at the irony. The Aztec Empire survives into the modern era partly because, by 1815, it has officially stopped calling itself an empire. And just as that political transformation is settling, a new force arrives that will change the Lake City more violently than any constitutional debate. Steam. Industrialization does not arrive as a single invention placed on a dock. It arrives as a system of pressures. Steam engines require fuel, metal, machining, maintenance, transport, capital, and people trained to keep tolerances much smaller than traditional craft production usually demands. Railways require land rights. Factories require workers who can be paid, disciplined, housed, injured, organized, and sometimes replaced. Mines require roads and pumps. Telegraphs require poles, wire, electricity, and agreements about who controls messages. The Federation of Anahuac enters this world unevenly. Its strongest advantage is not that it has secretly developed an independent industrial revolution centuries ahead of everyone else. It has not. Britain industrializes first and on a much larger scale. The Federation's advantage is political survival. It can buy technology as a sovereign state instead of receiving it entirely through a colonial economy designed elsewhere. That distinction shapes the terms of development. British firms offer locomotives in exchange for long concessions. French banks offer loans secured against customs revenue. American merchants want road and mining rights in the north. Spanish companies, now operating after the collapse of much of Spain's American empire, return as ordinary foreign investors to lands their ancestors failed to conquer. The irony is not lost on anyone. The first major railway project links the Gulf Trade Corridor to the Valley of Mexico. Its route becomes a national argument. Merchants want the shortest path to Tenochtitlan. Mountain communities object to land seizures. Military planners want a route that cannot easily be attacked from the coast. Chinampa farmers insist the terminal must not require filling a large section of wetland. Engineers complain that politics is making efficient construction impossible. Politicians reply that engineering without politics is simply another word for taking people's land. The line opens late and over budget. It changes the country anyway. Travel that once required days becomes possible in hours. Fresh food reaches inland cities more predictably. Troops move faster. Newspapers spread more quickly. So do strikes. Factories grow around transport hubs. Textile production becomes one of the first sectors to industrialize. This creates a painful transition for craft households whose skills once guaranteed a market. Machine-made cloth is cheaper. Some artisans become factory workers. Some move into luxury production. Some lose everything. The state celebrates modernization in official speeches. Workers discover that modernization often means 12-hour shifts beside dangerous machines. The first great industrial strike in Tenochtitlan begins in a textile district beside a canal. It is suppressed. Then it happens again 2 years later. Then in another city. By the 1860s, labor organizations are legal in some member states and prohibited in others. The federal system that once protected regional autonomy now creates a patchwork of worker protections businesses learn to exploit. Factories move across jurisdictional lines. Politicians argue that national standards will destroy local sovereignty. Workers argue that sovereignty is a poor substitute for fingers lost in machinery. Industrialization changes the lake itself. Steam pumps make drainage projects more powerful. Developers once again propose converting wetlands into urban land. Rail companies want straight embankments across water that farmers still use as productive landscape. Polluted runoff enters canals. Tanneries, metal shops, chemical works, and dense neighborhoods make water quality worse. The old water system cannot simply absorb an industrial city. For the second time in its long history, Tenochtitlan has to decide whether being a lake city is an inconvenience to overcome or part of the infrastructure that keeps it alive. The answer changes district by district. Several inner canals are covered or converted into streets. Others become industrial transport routes. Outer wetlands receive legal protection after a cholera outbreak reveals how badly contaminated urban water has become. New aqueducts bring cleaner water from farther away. Sewers are built imperfectly. By the end of the 19th century, the city looks less like a surviving pre-Columbian capital than like a modern industrial metropolis built on an unusually persistent aquatic skeleton. Stone causeways carry tram lines. Steam launches pull cargo barges. Electric lighting appears along ceremonial avenues while poorer neighborhoods remain dark. Old temples rise beside iron bridges. Newspapers print stock prices next to calendrical festival notices. Modernity does not replace the past. It crowds around it. Then the continent to the north becomes dangerous. The United States expands rapidly during the 19th century. In our history, that expansion eventually collides with an independent Mexico created from New Spain. War in the 1840s transfers an enormous territory to the United States. Our alternate world has no equivalent Mexico with the same borders. Northern North America is politically more fragmented. Spanish settlements remain in some regions longer. Indigenous confederacies survive differently. Independent republics emerge from former Spanish territories. Texas develops through a different mixture of settlers, local governments, and foreign influence. The precise map is impossible to predict because changing the fate of central Mexico in 1521 changes 3 centuries of migration and administration afterward. But one broad pressure remains highly plausible. The United States wants land and access to the Pacific. Anahuac wants foreign armies far from the Valley of Mexico. The borderlands between them become contested. The Federation has an advantage the historical Mexican state did not possess in exactly the same form. Centuries of continuous institutions and a military system that has never been dismantled by colonial rule and rebuilt after independence. It has disadvantages too. Its northern authority is weaker than its central authority. Many frontier communities do not identify strongly with Tenochtitlan. Some prefer trade with the United States. Some indigenous peoples in the North see Anahuac as another southern power trying to claim their land. A war in the 1840s still becomes possible. In our scenario, it happens, but not as the same Mexican-American War. American forces cross disputed territory and capture several northern towns. Naval units blockade ports allied with the Federation. Newspapers in the United States predict that Tenochtitlan will fall quickly if the army simply advances far enough south. They are wrong. The terrain is difficult. Supply lines stretch. The Federation uses rail and canal transport near its core. Regional militias fight in their own landscapes. European powers, worried about excessive American expansion, provide loans and weapons without committing troops. After 2 years, both governments accept a treaty. Nahuatl loses territory. The United States gains access and influence in the West. But Tenochtitlan remains independent. The war becomes a national trauma. It also creates a dangerous myth. Politicians begin telling citizens that 5 centuries of survival prove the Federation is uniquely destined to endure. That idea will cause trouble. Survival can teach humility. It can also teach arrogance. In the decades after the war, central governments expand military spending and use security as an argument for greater control over provinces. Newspaper critics accuse officials of rebuilding the old empire under modern vocabulary. The ceremonial Huey-Telatoni, now largely removed from executive government, unexpectedly becomes a symbol used by both sides. Conservatives invoke the office as proof of continuity. Reformers argue that continuity means preserving the compacts, not palace privilege. The political crisis eventually produces a new constitution in the 1870s. Universal male suffrage expands substantially, though property and residency restrictions persist in some regions for years. Women's organizations immediately ask why a constitution that speaks endlessly of ancient communal rights excludes half the adult population from national voting. The government promises to study the question. Women spend the next 40 years making that promise increasingly uncomfortable. Education becomes central to the struggle. Public schooling expands across the Federation during the 19th century. The language question becomes politically explosive. Should schools teach primarily in Nahuatl because it is the federal language? Should children begin in the language spoken at home? Should Spanish be mandatory because it connects the country to international trade? What about Maya languages, Mixtec, Zapotec, Otomi, Purapeca, Totonac, and many others spoken inside or beside the Federation? For decades, officials pursue contradictory policies. Some promote Nahuatl as a unifying national language and accidentally reproduce the very cultural centralization the old empire once imposed through tribute. Regional movements resist. By the early 20th century, educational policy shifts toward multilingual schooling in areas with strong local languages, while Nahuatl and Spanish become the 2 most widely taught shared languages. The result is messy. Textbooks are expensive to produce. Teacher training is difficult. Some languages remain endangered despite official protection. But the basic political principle changes. Indigenous language is no longer treated as something modernity must erase. It is treated as infrastructure worth maintaining. That has consequences far beyond school. Scientific terminology develops in Nahuatl rather than existing only in translation from Spanish or English. Courts operate in multiple languages. Radio broadcasting later accelerates linguistic standardization while also making regional accents and vocabularies matters of public pride. Literature flourishes across languages. A novelist from Oaxaca becomes famous for refusing to translate half the dialogue in her books. Readers complain. She becomes more popular. Archaeology also develops differently in a country where the descendants of the people being studied control many of the institutions doing the studying. The ruins of Teotihuacan are still ancient and mysterious to the Mexica. The Mexica themselves considered the city sacred and old long before Europeans arrived. In our alternate world, excavations there begin under local scholarly institutions rather than colonial or foreign antiquarian frameworks. That does not make archaeology automatically respectful. 19th century scholars everywhere are capable of arrogance. Tombs are opened carelessly. Objects are removed to national museums without community consent. Human remains become scientific specimens. By the 20th century, descendant communities begin demanding returns. The argument sounds familiar to our own world, but the power relationships are different. Foreign museums possess fewer spectacular objects from central Mexico because there was never a colonial period in which enormous quantities of material could leave under the same conditions. At the same time, Tenochtitlan's own National Museum is accused of behaving like an empire towards smaller indigenous peoples. A Zapotec activist asks why returning an object from London to Tenochtitlan counts as justice if it was taken from Oaxaca in the first place. The question cannot be answered with patriotic mythology. The Federation slowly develops laws recognizing community ownership and shared custody of certain heritage objects. Again, survival requires learning that being colonized in one possible history does not prevent you from acting colonially towards someone else. By 1900, the country that began as a tribute empire has become an industrial federal state with railways, factories, universities, political parties, labor movements, newspapers, telegraphs, modern artillery, constitutional law, deep inequality, religious pluralism, and a capital still threaded by water. It has avoided Spanish conquest. It has not avoided history. And now history is about to become faster. Electricity spreads. Oil becomes strategic. Mass politics arrives. 2 world wars reshape global power. And the Federation of Anahuac has to decide whether 500 years of survival means staying out of other people's catastrophes, or accepting that by the 20th century there may no longer be such a thing as someone else's catastrophe. The 20th century begins with optimism and pressure. Electric trams replace many horse-drawn vehicles in the capital. Hydroelectric projects expand. Telephone networks connect ministries and businesses. Oil exploration in Gulf regions attracts foreign companies willing to offer capital in exchange for extraordinary concessions. The Federation's oldest political argument returns in industrial clothing. Who owns resources beneath local land? A village may hold communal rights to the surface, while a federal law claims minerals below it. Foreign investors care little about the distinction as long as someone signs a contract. Local communities care intensely. Oil turns the disagreement into crisis. Several provincial governments sign contracts without federal approval. The central government declares them invalid. Companies appeal to foreign governments. Warships appear near ports during one diplomatic confrontation, not to invade, but to make the meaning of commercial pressure unmistakable. The Federation responds by creating a national energy company alongside private firms, a compromise almost nobody likes. It works well enough to survive. The new wealth accelerates urban growth. It also deepens inequality. Tenochtitlan's center becomes spectacular at night. Electric light reflects from canals. Government buildings are illuminated. Department stores sell imported goods. Wealthy families build houses combining modern materials with revival styles inspired by pre-contact architecture. Poorer districts expand at the edge of the metropolitan lake system without adequate sewers or clean water. Public health officials who boast about centuries of epidemic experience discover that old institutions do not automatically solve modern sanitation. Tuberculosis spreads through crowded housing. Industrial accidents rise. Air pollution appears. A modern city has invented modern problems. Political participation grows at the same time. Women's organizations, which spent decades building schools, mutual aid associations, professional networks, newspapers, and legal campaigns, finally win federal voting rights in the early 20th century in our imagined timeline. The victory does not create equality. It changes who can formally contest inequality. Women enter the federal assembly. Some come from elite families and defend conservative interests. Others organize workers. Indigenous women from rural regions challenge urban feminists who assume every woman's political priorities are the same. The debates are loud, complicated, and permanent. That is what political inclusion usually looks like when it is real. Then Europe goes to war in 1914. Nahuatl declares neutrality. The decision is popular. Why should a Mesoamerican federation send soldiers to die because European empires have turned their rivalries into industrial slaughter? Trade makes neutrality difficult. European demand raises prices for oil, metals, food, fibers, and chemicals. Shipping becomes dangerous. Foreign agents operate in ports. Both sides want resources and diplomatic support. The Federation profits and suffers at the same time. Then influenza arrives near the end of the war. For a society whose modern political identity was forged partly through 16th century epidemics, the psychological effect is enormous. Public health institutions activate quickly. Schools close in some regions. Public gatherings are limited. Masks are used inconsistently and argued about passionately. Rail travel spreads disease despite controls. Hospitals overflow. People still die in great numbers. The old national story says the Federation survived because its ancestors learned from epidemics. The influenza pandemic reminds everyone that learning is not immunity. A century of medical institutions cannot make a new virus polite. The experience strengthens investment in epidemiology, laboratories, clean water, vaccination programs, and rural clinics during the following decades. It also becomes part of a broader argument about federal power. How much authority should a central government have during a health emergency? The question sounds almost modern because it never stops being modern. Between the world wars, the Federation experiences its most serious democratic breakdown since the 19th century. A military-backed president named Zacapili Carranza, fictional in our alternate history, despite the familiar surname from a world shaped differently, wins office promising order after economic crisis and labor unrest. He expands executive power. Opposition newspapers are restricted. Provincial governors are replaced through legal maneuvers that are legal only because courts have been intimidated. The ceremonial Huey Teletoni publicly criticizes the government for the first time in decades and becomes unexpectedly popular among Democrats. The irony is exquisite. An office descended from imperial monarchy becomes a symbol against authoritarian presidential power. Carranza's supporters accuse the palace of plotting restoration. The palace replies that constitutional limits are older than the presidency. Street protests adopt imagery from the Agreement of the Four Roads. Students carry reproductions of the old document beside modern slogans about free elections. After several years, the regime falls not through one dramatic revolution, but through a coalition of provincial governments, labor unions, business leaders tired of arbitrary policy, students, judges, and military officers unwilling to fire on large demonstrations. The Constitution is amended again. Presidential terms are limited more strictly. Emergency powers receive judicial review. The ceremonial monarchy remains. Every generation rediscovers that old institutions can survive if people keep changing what they are for. Then the Second World War begins. Neutrality lasts longer this time, but global economics and geography make distance impossible. Japanese expansion across the Pacific threatens trade. German submarines attack shipping in the Atlantic. The United States pressures every government in the hemisphere to align more closely with Allied defense. Nahuatl eventually enters the war after merchant vessels are sunk and intelligence reveals Axis efforts to disrupt oil infrastructure. Its military contribution is modest compared with the great powers. Air squadrons and engineering units serve abroad. Naval forces patrol coastal waters. Factories produce material for Allied supply chains. The political consequences at home are larger. Wartime industrialization accelerates migration into cities. Women enter sectors previously dominated by men. Veterans return expecting political recognition. Indigenous soldiers from remote regions discover that federal institutions treat them differently in uniform than out of it. Post-war reform movements use that contradiction. The world after 1945 also forces the Federation to confront colonialism globally. This is emotionally complicated. Anahuac's national mythology is built around having escaped European conquest. Leaders therefore speak loudly in favor of decolonization in Asia and Africa. Critics point out that the Federation still contains communities whose lands were incorporated through old wars, treaties signed under unequal conditions, or 19th century expansion. Foreign diplomats enjoy asking whether Anahuac is an anti-colonial state or simply an old empire that successfully modernized. The official answer is anti-colonial. The historical answer is more uncomfortable. Both. This becomes one reason the second half of the 20th century sees another shift toward regional autonomy. Federal courts recognize stronger language rights. Local governments gain authority over education and cultural policy. Some regions negotiate control over natural resources. A few separatist movements demand full independence. Most do not succeed. Several win enough autonomy that the Federation becomes more asymmetrical, different regions possessing different constitutional relationships with the center. Political scientists hate explaining it. Citizens mostly learn which office handles which document. The economy changes again. Manufacturing grows rapidly after the war. Automobiles fill roads designed originally around canals and trams. Suburban development spreads into the basin. Planners propose filling more wetlands for highways and housing. For a moment, it seems the ancient compromise with the lake will finally collapse under modern growth. Then the city experiences a disastrous flood season followed by severe subsidence in heavily pumped districts. The old argument returns with new instruments. Hydrologists now measure what Chinampa communities had warned about in practical language for centuries. The basin is not passive ground. Drain it, pump it, pave it, and water returns through other problems. A metropolitan water authority is created with unusual power. Some highways are built anyway. Other projects are canceled. Wetlands are restored in strategic zones. Wastewater treatment improves slowly. The surviving Chinampa belt becomes protected not merely as heritage, but as functioning agricultural and hydrological landscape. This does not turn Tenochtitlan into an ecological utopia. By the 1970s, its air can be terrible. Its rivers and canals are polluted. Traffic jams become a national joke. Poor neighborhoods receive services later than wealthy ones. A city can preserve ancient water knowledge and still make modern planning mistakes. What continuity provides is not perfection. It provides arguments with memory. When an engineer says the lake is empty land waiting to be developed, farmers can point to legal records for centuries old and ask how many times the city intends to relearn the same lesson. Cultural life flourishes in that tension. Cinema in Nahuatl develops a huge domestic audience. Spanish-language films remain equally important. Musicians combine indigenous instruments, European strings, brass traditions, Caribbean rhythms, and later rock, electronic music, and hip-hop. The result is no more purely Aztec than modern Mexican music in our world is purely Spanish. It is modern because it has a past, not because it escaped one. The capital's architecture becomes one of the clearest expressions of this. A government ministry may have a modern steel and glass structure built around a courtyard aligned with an older ceremonial axis. Metro stations display archaeological layers uncovered during construction. In some places, trains curve around preserved foundations because destroying them would be politically impossible. In others, developers win and preservationists spend decades regretting it. The Templo Mayor precinct is no archaeological ruin in this timeline. It is more complicated. Parts remain active ceremonial spaces for reformed traditional religions. Parts function as historic monuments. Parts were rebuilt after earthquakes and fires so many times that scholars argue which stones, if any, still belong to the 15th century. Christians, secular citizens, and traditional practitioners all claim some relationship to the site because it has become national history as well as religious space. Tourists ask whether ceremonies they watch are authentic. Priests respond that a tradition practiced for 500 additional years is allowed to change. That may be the best answer in the entire city. By the late 20th century, the Federation of Anahuac is a middle-income industrial state with deep social inequality, competitive elections, periods of corruption, powerful regional governments, a ceremonial royal house, a multilingual education system, and an economy tied tightly to the United States, the Caribbean, Europe, and increasingly Asia. It has nuclear research reactors, but no nuclear weapons. It launches satellites through international partnerships. Its universities publish in Nahuatl, Spanish, and English. Its football teams have replaced ritual warfare as the safest available method for neighboring cities to hate one another publicly. And then the internet arrives. For the first time since printing, a technology changes the speed at which political memory can move through society. Millions of pages of manuscripts, court cases, pictorial codices, newspapers, oral histories, and archaeological records begin to be digitized. A document once available only to specialists in a controlled archive appears on the screen of a teenager hundreds of kilometers away. Among them is the Agreement of the Four Roads. The same document Tenochtitlan carries on the train in 2026. Its digital copy is free. The original is priceless. And the argument about what it means has never ended. Now return to Tenochtitlan on the train. The year is 2026 again. She is 31 years old, an archivist at the Federal House of Memory, a complex built partly over an 18th century records hall and partly over a much older ceremonial district. Her job is not to guard a romantic past from change. It is to manage change without losing the evidence of what came before. This morning, the original Agreement of the Four Roads is being moved for conservation work. The document rarely leaves its climate-controlled storage room. Its fibers have survived 5 centuries because generations recopied it before conservation science existed and later learned how to stabilize the original. Most citizens have never seen it in person. They know the words attributed to its opening clause from school. No road shall be held by one city alone. Whether that sentence would really have appeared in a 16th century treaty is part of our invention tonight. In Tenochtitlan's world, it has become so famous that historians sometimes wish it were less poetic. Political slogans have a habit of flattening difficult documents. When Tenochtitlan arrives at work, a group of schoolchildren is already waiting in the public gallery. They have come from a bilingual school in a district where Nahuatl and Spanish are both spoken at home. Their teacher is explaining the difference between the Mexica, the broader Nahuatl world, the Triple Alliance, and the modern Federation. One child raises a hand. So are we Aztecs? The teacher pauses. It is the kind of question adults turn into conferences. Some of us are descendants of people who would have been called Mexica or Nahuatl, she says. Some are not. Aztec is a historical name people still use. It doesn't describe everybody in the country. Another child asks, then why do foreigners call us the Aztec country? The teacher smiles. Because foreigners like short names. Tenochtitlan hears this while walking past and tries not to laugh. The exchange captures something important. If the Aztec Empire had survived, modern identity would not be a simple continuation of a single 15th century ethnic label. 500 years of migration, intermarriage, federal expansion, refugee movements, international trade, religious change, and urbanization would make that impossible. Millions of citizens would have ancestors from peoples once ruled by the Mexica. Millions would descend from peoples who resisted them. Some would have European ancestry from merchants, soldiers, missionaries, immigrants, and refugees who arrived without conquering the state. Some would have African ancestry through Atlantic migrations, including people brought into the hemisphere through the slave trade and people who arrived later as free migrants. Some would have Asian ancestry through Pacific and modern migration routes. Modern Anahuac would be indigenous in political continuity without being ethnically simple. That distinction would shape almost every national argument. There would be people who want the state to emphasize Mexica heritage more strongly. Others would say that doing so turns a federal civilization into the story of its old capital. Tlaxcala would remember that its ancestors fought Tenochtitlan before they ever negotiated with it. Purepeca communities would remind everyone that their state was never conquered by the Mexica in the first place. Maya regions would have their own histories, many only partially connected to the Federation. The word survival would itself be political. Whose survival? This makes modern nationalism less comfortable than the tourist posters suggest. Those posters are beautiful. They show the lake at sunrise, monumental architecture, featherwork, markets, electric boats, volcanic mountains, and farmers moving through Chinampa canals. They do not show parliamentary committee hearings about sewage funding. Civilizations, unfortunately, spend more time discussing sewage funding than destiny. The modern capital may contain 15 or 20 million people across its metropolitan region, depending on exactly how our alternate demographic history unfolds. We should not pretend to know the number precisely. Epidemics, migration, borders, industrialization, and different national policies would all change population growth. What we can imagine more confidently is the structure. Dense urban districts occupy much of the basin. The old lake survives in managed sections rather than in its pre-contact form. Wetland parks, agricultural zones, reservoirs, navigation channels, restored habitats, and flood control basins form an interconnected water network. Some waterways are clean enough for recreation. Others remain works in progress despite decades of promises. Electric ferries are useful because water is still part of transport, not merely scenery. Metro and commuter rail carry far more people than boats. Roads remain crowded anyway. The city's great environmental challenge is balancing a huge population with a basin that has always had limited fresh water and complicated drainage. Climate change makes this harder. Long droughts reduce water supply. Intense rainfall threatens floods. Warmer temperatures stress crops and wetlands. The old Chinampa system receives new attention because it is productive, local, culturally significant, and adaptable in some conditions. But no serious planner claims it can feed an entire modern megacity by itself. That distinction matters too. Ancient knowledge can remain valuable without becoming magical. Modern agronomists work with farmers on water quality, soil fertility, crop diversity, pest control, and market access. Sensors monitor canals beside methods passed through families. Solar pumps sit near hand tools. University researchers sometimes arrive with expensive equipment and rediscover something farmers have been saying for years. Farmers make sure to mention this. The economy beyond the lake is fully modern. Aircraft manufacturing, software, pharmaceuticals, food processing, automotive production, electronics, tourism, agriculture, energy, finance, and creative industries all matter. The Federation trades heavily with the United States and belongs to regional economic agreements that require endless negotiation over labor, environmental rules, and tariffs. Being the state that defeated Cortés 5 centuries earlier does not allow a modern factory to ignore semiconductor supply chains. History provides identity. It does not manufacture microchips by itself. Nahuatl remains visible everywhere in the capital. Government signs use it. Television networks broadcast in it. Pop music uses it casually rather than ceremonially. Advertising agencies invent terrible slogans in it. Teenagers shorten words and text messages in ways language academies dislike. This may be the clearest sign that the language truly survived as a major modern language. It is allowed to be ordinary. Languages displayed only in museums are honored differently from languages used to complain about the bus. Spanish is equally ordinary. Many citizens switch between the two without thinking. English has enormous influence through trade, science, entertainment, and the internet. Regional languages remain stronger in some areas and endangered in others. There are political fights over all of this. A nationalist party proposes requiring more Nahuatl in universities. Scientists reply that international research already demands English. Regional leaders ask why the federal government always treats Nahuatl preservation as more urgent than their languages. Parents ask what will help children find jobs. Linguists remind everyone that language policy rarely survives contact with teenagers. Religion remains plural. Traditional Mesoamerican religions have undergone 5 centuries of theology, reform, institutionalization, schism, revival, skepticism, and cultural reinterpretation. A priest serving at the Central Ceremonial Precinct in 2026 would not perform religion exactly as a priest in 1519 did, just as a Christian minister today does not inhabit the religious world of medieval Europe unchanged. Christianity has large communities and many denominations. Some families move between traditions over generations. Some people combine them. Many citizens are secular. Old festivals continue even among people who interpret them culturally rather than literally. Human sacrifice belongs to history, museums, theological argument, and political memory, not modern legal practice. The history is not hidden. Students learn about it alongside warfare, tribute, slavery, conquest, public works, poetry, agriculture, law, family life, and art. A mature society does not need every part of its past to be admirable in order to consider the past its own. That becomes especially important each year on the anniversary of the failed 1521 siege. For centuries, the holiday was celebrated as Victory Day. Military parades crossed the old causeway. Politicians told simplified stories of heroic Mexico warriors defeating foreign invaders. By the late 20th century, Tlaxcalan and Totonac historians objected. Their ancestors' choices were being reduced to treason in a national story that ignored why they opposed Tenochtitlan in the first place. The holiday changes. It is renamed the Day of the Compacts. The military parade becomes smaller. Public ceremonies include readings from communities that fought on different sides. Conservatives accuse the government of apologizing for victory. Historians reply that understanding why an empire nearly collapsed is a better defense against collapse than pretending everyone always loved it. The argument repeats every year. Perhaps that is healthy. A past nobody argues about is usually a past nobody is using. At noon, Seatlali carries the old document into a conservation laboratory. Under magnification, the paper looks less like a national symbol and more like what it really is. Plant fibers, pigment, cracks, repairs, tiny traces of handling. One corner was replaced in the 17th century. A 19th century conservator used an adhesive modern experts now dislike. There are fingerprints from someone who lived before microscopes could reveal them. The document survived because people repeatedly intervened in it. The same can be said of the state. Before we decide exactly what the word survived means, widen the view beyond the archive and spend one ordinary day in this city. Morning begins in the southern agricultural belt. A farmer named Mateo Zacapilli opens a sluice gate before sunrise. His family has worked chinampa plots for generations, though not continuously on the same exact rectangles of land. Flood control projects moved channels. Property reforms changed boundaries. A 20th century road destroyed one parcel. A restoration program created another. The family's history is continuous only in the way the country's history is continuous. Through change. Mateo checks water quality on a small digital sensor before pushing a wooden pole into canal mud with a motion his grandfather taught him. He grows greens, herbs, flowers, maize, and specialty crops sold to restaurants and neighborhood markets. The farm is not a museum. It has electric pumps, weather forecasts, biological pest controls, mobile payment, government forms, and arguments about fertilizer prices. School groups visit often enough that Mateo has learned exactly how long children remain interested in agricultural history before they want snacks. When a teacher calls the Chinampas floating gardens, he gently corrects her. They are not rafts drifting around the lake. They are built fields and shallow wetland landscapes, held and maintained through soil, sediment, vegetation, canals, and labor. He has corrected this sentence hundreds of times. His daughter says correcting tourists is now part of the family business. By 8 in the morning, produce from the farm is on an electric cargo boat heading toward a market district whose commercial ancestry reaches back far beyond the Spanish arrival. The market is modern in every inconvenient sense. Health inspectors check refrigeration. Traders complain about rent. Imported fruit sits beside local vegetables. A coffee seller takes payment by phone. Delivery riders move packages through alleys that were once canals and canals that were once wider lake. Nobody has recreated a 16th century market for authenticity. That would be a tourist attraction somewhere else. This one survived by selling what people actually want now. At a nearby university, a seminar begins in Nahuatl on constitutional history. The professor places a digital image of a 16th century pictorial manuscript beside a later alphabetic copy. The students are asked to identify what changed between them. One notices a place glyph missing from the later version. Another notices that the alphabetic text contains a legal phrase borrowed from Spanish. A third asks whether the copyist misunderstood the original image. The professor smiles. That is the point. Continuity does not eliminate uncertainty. Sometimes it creates more evidence to disagree about. Across campus, an astronomy department is preparing observations with an international telescope array. Computer screens display data using the same equations physicists use everywhere else in the world. The software interface is mostly English because global science has habits of its own. The researchers speak Nahuatl and Spanish around it. One of the telescope instruments has a project name borrowed from a pre-contact sky deity. A graduate student privately thinks the name is embarrassingly dramatic. Her supervisor loves it. That argument is also continuity. At noon, the Federal Assembly begins a debate broadcast live across the country. The subject is water. It is almost always water eventually. A proposal would restrict groundwater extraction in rapidly growing outer districts and increase federal funding for wastewater reuse. Regional representatives accuse the capital of taking water from surrounding communities while preaching ecological wisdom. Capital representatives reply that millions of people cannot be supplied through symbolism. A Chinampa coalition demands more investment in canal cleanup. Industrial associations warn that new discharge rules will raise costs. Environmental scientists present maps. A politician misquotes one of the maps within 12 minutes. Social media notices immediately. Outside the assembly, a small demonstration carries a banner reproducing a line from the Agreement of the Four Roads. No road shall be held by one city alone. The protesters have replaced road with water. Seetlali sees the photograph on her phone and groans. The original sentence, she knows, probably did not mean anything like modern watershed governance. Her colleague reminds her that once a document becomes 500 years old, historians lose control of it. In another part of the city, school children visit the central ceremonial precinct. Their guide explains that the site contains layers. A 15th century platform preserved inside a later rebuilding. 17th century repairs after an earthquake. An 18th century ceremonial hall. 19th century nationalist additions that modern architects now consider excessive, 20th century conservation work, a 21st century seismic reinforcement system hidden beneath stone. One child asks which part is the real temple. The guide gives the answer she has given many times. All of them are real. They're just from different times. The sentence could describe the entire alternate country. In the afternoon, tourists cross the city looking for the Aztec Empire and repeatedly encounter a modern federation instead. They expect warriors and find civil servants. They expect ancient ritual and find commuters waiting for a delayed ferry. They expect untouched indigenous tradition and find a teenager wearing headphones, speaking Spanish to one friend and Nahuatl to another while eating food containing ingredients from 3 continents. The disappointment lasts only if they wanted history to be dead. Living continuity is less tidy. It is also more interesting. At sunset, the lake reflects towers, bridges, temple roofs, apartment blocks, and the volcanic horizon. The geography still imposes itself. Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl remain beyond the basin as they do in our world, though the cities around them carry different political histories. The mountains do not care which empire survived. The evening wind moves across water that could easily have been drained centuries earlier. Ferries turn on lights. Restaurants fill. Music travels across a plaza. The old city is neither ancient nor new. It is accumulated. Only after seeing that ordinary city does the question of plausibility become useful. Could this really have happened? Not exactly as we have told it. No historian could responsibly claim that a specific treaty, a specific failed siege, a specific constitution, or a specific modern federation was waiting behind one altered decision in 1520. Counterfactual history cannot predict 5 centuries with that precision. The farther we travel from the changed event, the wider the possibilities become. A ruler dies in one timeline and survives in another. A drought changes a war. A marriage changes a succession. A merchant route enriches one city and bypasses another. A technology arrives 10 years earlier. A rebellion succeeds. An epidemic follows a different road. After enough centuries, tiny divergences become entire worlds. So our modern Tenochtitlan is not a prediction. It is a disciplined possibility built around a few historical constraints. The first constraint is that the Spanish conquest depended heavily on indigenous politics as well as European military technology. Cortés needed allies. The Mexica had enemies. Change the coalition and the military outcome can change. The second constraint is disease. An independent state cannot escape old world epidemics merely by winning a battle. Any believable survival story must pass through devastating demographic loss. The third is repeated contact. Spain would not simply disappear after defeat, nor would other European powers. A surviving state would need diplomacy, weapons, trade, maritime knowledge, and institutional adaptation quickly enough to discourage another conquest. The fourth is internal reform. If Tenochtitlan tried to rebuild the exact tribute relationships that made so many neighbors willing to fight against it, it would recreate the coalition that nearly destroyed it. Survival requires reducing the incentive to betray the center. And the fifth is cultural change. No society can spend 5 centuries exchanging goods, diseases, ideas, technologies, migrants, religions, and political institutions with the rest of the world while remaining culturally untouched. The price of survival would be transformation. Once those constraints are accepted, a sovereign Mesoamerican state continuing into the modern era becomes unusual but not conceptually absurd. Other non-European states survive the age of European imperial expansion through mixtures of geography, military resistance, diplomacy, reform, selective borrowing, rivalry among imperial powers, and luck. Some lost sovereignty later. Some retained it. There is no universal law stating that Tenochtitlan had to become Mexico City. It happened. That is different from saying it had to happen. After that ordinary day, the question that began our story becomes unavoidable. Did the Aztec Empire actually survive? Or did something else survive in its place? There are two answers. The first is no. The empire Cortés encountered in 1519 does not survive. Its tribute relationships are dismantled. Its military ideology changes. Its religious institutions transform. Its ruling office loses executive power. Its member cities gain constitutional rights. Its economy becomes connected to global capitalism. Its people use technologies, languages, foods, laws, and ideas their 16th century ancestors never knew. If survival means remaining the same, the Aztec Empire dies shortly after contact, even in our alternate history. The second answer is yes. Tenochtitlan remains a capital. Nahuatl remains a major language of government and daily life. Political institutions descend continuously, however indirectly, from the pre-contact order. Communities preserve land rights and archives without passing through the same centuries of Spanish colonial rule. Indigenous religions evolve from living institutions rather than being reconstructed mainly after suppression. Historical memory is transmitted inside sovereign institutions controlled primarily by descendants of the societies that created it. That kind of continuity is real too. We accept it elsewhere without demanding purity. Modern states routinely claim histories extending through revolutions, constitutions, dynastic changes, invasions, religious transformations, industrialization, and altered borders. Nobody asks whether England survived the Middle Ages on the condition that it still used medieval law unchanged. Nobody says Japan ceased to exist because its political order and technology transformed dramatically. Continuity is usually a chain, not a photograph. In that sense, the surviving Aztec world is plausible only because it becomes unrecognizable in many details. Now ask what this would mean for the country we call Mexico. The simplest answer is that Mexico, as we know it, would not exist. Modern Mexico is not merely the Aztec Empire with Spain added on top. It emerged through colonial New Spain, indigenous persistence, African presence, Spanish institutions, Catholicism, independence, 19th century wars, liberal reforms, revolution, migration, regional cultures, and centuries of mixture and conflict. Remove the conquest of central Mexico, and you do not produce a more authentic version of modern Mexico. You produce another country. Its boundaries would be different. Its languages would have different status. Its religious history would be different. Its racial categories would develop differently. The idea of mestizage that became so important to modern Mexican national identity would not take the same form. Even familiar city names might change. Some colonial towns would never be founded in the same way. Other indigenous cities might grow into major modern centers instead. Mexico City would not be Mexico City. It would still be Tenochtitlan, though the sound of that name after 7 additional centuries might itself have shifted in ordinary speech. And modern Mexican culture from our real timeline would not simply move intact into the alternate one. There might be no mariachi as we know it, no exact equivalent of modern Mexican Catholic festivals, no same national cuisine, because cuisine is history made edible, no same literature, political mythology, or revolutionary tradition. The alternate world gains continuity and loses things our actual history created. Counterfactual history always works this way. Saving one thing does not leave everything else untouched. The same caution applies to science and technology. A surviving Tenochtitlan would preserve more indigenous intellectual continuity. That is important, but it does not follow that the Federation would invent electricity 2 centuries early or reach the moon before everyone else. Scientific revolutions depend on enormous networks of instruments, mathematics, institutions, energy systems, trade, communication, and accumulated experimentation. Mesoamerican astronomical, agricultural, botanical, engineering, and medical traditions would add different observations and questions to those networks. Some discoveries might happen earlier, others later. Different people would receive credit. Entire research traditions might exist that our history lost. But there is no responsible way to turn cultural survival into automatic technological superiority. The most significant difference may be less dramatic. More knowledge would remain connected to the communities that developed it. Consider agriculture. The Chinampas already demonstrate extraordinary productivity and long-term resilience in suitable shallow lake environments. Their continued large-scale development could influence urban agriculture, wetland management, and ecological planning across the Federation. But nobody would cover dry northern Mexico with Chinampas simply because the system works beautifully in Xochimilco. Local technologies are local for reasons. Their power lies in understanding environments precisely, not in becoming universal recipes. Consider medicine. A sovereign indigenous medical tradition would preserve botanical knowledge institutionally while engaging with European and later global medicine. Some useful therapies might enter modern pharmacology with clearer recognition of their origins. Some traditional treatments would fail controlled testing and disappear from clinical use. Others might survive as cultural practices rather than medicines. Continuity would allow criticism from within instead of requiring preservation to mean unquestioning acceptance. Consider astronomy. The calendrical traditions of Mesoamerica would remain historically continuous, but modern observatories would still use global mathematics, spectroscopy, radio astronomy, space telescopes, and physics developed through international collaboration. By 2026, a Nahuatl-speaking astrophysicist in Tenochtitlan might discuss dark matter in a language whose technical vocabulary evolved through 5 centuries of translation and invention. That is remarkable enough. There is no need to give her an Aztec spaceship to make the alternate world interesting. The global political consequences are similarly profound and uncertain. Spain without Central Mexico is weaker than Spain with New Spain, but how much weaker depends on what territories and mining regions it controls elsewhere. The Spanish monarchy still receives wealth from South America. It still participates in European wars. It still has an Atlantic empire. The United States still has powerful pressures toward continental expansion, but the states and borders it encounters are different. The survival of one large indigenous-led polity could also change how European powers think about American sovereignty. A treaty signed with Tenochtitlan demonstrates that an American state can remain a diplomatic actor rather than automatically becoming a colony. Other indigenous powers might seek firearms and alliances more aggressively after seeing that example. European empires might respond by accelerating conquest elsewhere before similar states can modernize. Success in one place does not guarantee safety in another. It may even increase danger. The history of the slave trade could shift at the margins as different ports and plantations develop, but it would not disappear because Tenochtitlan survives. The Atlantic demand for coerced labor arose from forces much larger than one Mesoamerican state. The Inca Empire is not automatically saved either. Its encounter with Spain has its own chronology, political divisions, diseases, and military circumstances. News that a powerful state in central Mexico resisted Spain might influence Andean decisions if it travels quickly enough. But assuming the Inca simply copy the Mexica solution would be another kind of fantasy. History does not offer templates that reliably transfer between mountains, lakes, rulers, epidemics, and alliances. What Tenochtitlan's survival changes most clearly is the range of possibilities everyone can see. Europeans can no longer tell themselves that large American states inevitably collapse upon contact. Indigenous rulers can no longer assume Europeans are merely strange coastal traders who can be absorbed into existing diplomacy without structural change. Both sides learn faster. That could make later encounters more negotiated. It could also make them more militarized. By 2026, this alternate history would therefore not feel like a world where colonialism never happened. European empires still colonize enormous territories. People are still displaced. Languages are still lost. Plantation systems still exploit labor. Wars still redraw borders. Industrial capitalism still transforms landscapes. Racism still develops, though its categories and political geography change. A surviving Aztec state is one exception large enough to reshape the hemisphere, not a spell that removes global violence. That makes its survival more meaningful, not less, because it would demonstrate something history often hides from us. Outcomes that later appear inevitable were once uncertain. In June 1520, nobody could see 500 years ahead. Cortés did not know he was standing at the beginning of a story that textbooks would later make look predetermined. Tlaxcalan leaders did not know what Spanish colonial rule would become. Mexico rulers did not know whether compromise with old enemies would save them or merely delay defeat. Ordinary people did not know whether the cough in the next house was a passing illness or the beginning of an epidemic that would change the continent. They made decisions without knowing which timeline they were creating. We always do. Citlali knows this better than most because she works with records made before outcomes were obvious. In the archive, famous historical figures are surrounded by ordinary paperwork. Food accounts, property disputes, requests for repairs, letters complaining about taxes, apprenticeship contracts, reports of sickness, a widow asking a court to enforce an inheritance, a merchant explaining why a shipment is late, a local council insisting that a bridge belongs to them and not to the neighboring town. The grand survival of a civilization is made from millions of people trying to solve smaller problems. This becomes clear when Citlali finishes work and leaves the archive. The evening air over the lake is cool. She walks instead of taking the train immediately. Near the old ceremonial center, commuters move around tourists. Vendors sell food from carts. Office workers check messages. A group of teenagers sits beside a canal arguing about music. A priest in ceremonial clothing crosses paths with two university students carrying laboratory equipment. Neither group pays much attention to the other. An electric ferry slides under a bridge. Nothing in the scene feels like an empire surviving. It feels like Tuesday. That may be the most convincing detail of all. Citlali finishes her walk as darkness settles over Tenochtitlan. She reaches a ferry platform beside the water. The city behind her is bright. The archive containing the agreement of the four roads is only a few blocks away, but from here it is invisible among newer buildings. The ferry arrives almost silently. She boards with commuters carrying groceries, laptops, school bags, flowers, tools, and tired expressions. Nobody discusses the survival of civilization. One passenger is watching a football match. Another is asleep before the boat leaves the platform. Two children are arguing over whose turn it is to sit beside the window. The boat moves into the channel. Citlali looks back toward the old center. 500 years earlier, canoes moved through these waters carrying food, warriors, tribute, messages, and people who could not imagine engines or electric light. 500 years from now, if the city still exists, its residents will probably find Citlali's world equally ancient. That thought comforts her. Survival has never meant reaching a final form. It means leaving someone else a world capable of changing again. And now, before we close, return one last time to 1520. The city is dark. No electric lights reflect from water. The Spanish have been driven away for the moment. Smallpox is moving through neighborhoods. The future is not visible. Inside a room near the ceremonial center, Exhausted representatives are arguing. These are not yet the formal negotiations that will produce the agreement of the Four Roads in 1522. They are earlier, improvised talks of the kind that make those later negotiations imaginable. They do not know they are creating our imagined alternate world. They are discussing tribute, road access, hostages, food, military obligations, old grievances, practical things. One delegate insists Tenochtitlan has already surrendered too much. Another replies that there will be nothing left to rule if every neighboring city prefers the foreigners. Someone asks for water. Someone else rubs tired eyes. A scribe prepares another sheet. Outside, the lake is calm. History does not look enormous while it is happening. It often looks like people in a room deciding what they are willing to give up in order to keep something else. In our real history, no agreement of the Four Roads saves Tenochtitlan. The coalition led by Cortés and his indigenous allies returns. The siege tightens. Disease and hunger devastate the city. On August 13, 1521, Cuauhtémoc is captured and organized resistance in Tenochtitlan ends. The city is destroyed and rebuilt as the center of New Spain. Indigenous people do not disappear. Nahuatl does not disappear. Mesoamerican cultures do not disappear. They adapt, resist, preserve, mix, rebuild, and continue inside a colonial world, and then inside modern Mexico. That real continuity matters. Imagining an independent Aztec survival should never require pretending that the actual descendants of the people of central Mexico somehow vanished when the empire fell. They did not. Millions of people in Mexico today carry indigenous languages, communities, histories, foods, place names, practices, and identities forward through a history far more complicated than the simple phrase, "The Aztecs disappeared." Our alternate timeline asks a narrower question. What if political sovereignty had continued too? What if the city itself had remained the capital of a state whose institutions descended from the world Cortés encountered? The answer, after everything we have imagined tonight, is not that the Aztec Empire would still look Aztec in the way a museum exhibit looks Aztec. The answer is that it would look modern. That is what successful survival eventually looks like. Old names attached to new arguments. Ancient streets carrying new traffic. Languages inventing words for technologies nobody once imagined. Religions changing their rituals. Constitutions limiting rulers whose ancestors had no constitution. Farmers using sensors and landscapes shaped centuries earlier. Children learning that the people who saved their country were not all on the same side at the beginning. An archive repairing a piece of paper for the 10th or 20th time. And somewhere in all of it, a memory of a city in a lake that once came very close to being destroyed. Let that city begin to soften now. The electric lights along our imaginary canals can grow smaller. The ferries can finish their routes. The assembly chamber can empty after another unresolved debate about water. The market stalls can close. The archive lights can switch off one room at a time, leaving the old document resting in darkness inside its protective case. It does not need anyone to interpret it tonight. Tomorrow there will be scholars again, students again, arguments again. Tomorrow someone will insist the treaty means one thing, and someone else will produce 3 footnotes explaining why it means another. Civilization can wait until morning. For now, imagine the lake becoming still, mist beginning to form over the water, the mountains beyond the basin fading into darkness. Somewhere in the Chinampa district, irrigation gates are closed for the night. Somewhere in a tower, a programmer finishes work in a language descended from words spoken before Cortés was born. Somewhere a child is learning those same words and complaining about homework. Somewhere a priest is preparing for a ceremony whose ancestors would recognize parts of it and misunderstand others. Somewhere a church bell sounds across water. Somewhere traffic continues because even alternate civilizations cannot solve traffic. And then, gradually, even that noise becomes quieter. The thought experiment has carried us through conquests that failed, epidemics that did not, reforms, muskets, printing presses, constitutional crises, steam engines, factories, railways, wars, elections, satellites, and a modern city that survives by changing almost everything about itself. You do not need to hold all of it now. Let the centuries fold back together. Let 2026 drift toward 1520. Let steel bridges fade into causeways. Let electric ferries become canoes. Let printed books become painted and written manuscripts. Let the towers disappear until the dark water reflects only stars. For a few moments, we are back in the Valley of Mexico before anyone knows what comes next. The future could still branch. The city could fall. The city could survive. The empire could preserve itself by transforming into something else. None of those possibilities needs your decision tonight. History has already chosen the path we inherited. And in that real path, there is still a living city, still Nahuatl, still Chinampa agriculture in Xochimilco, still indigenous communities, still archaeologists uncovering layers beneath modern streets, still people debating what the conquest meant and what should be remembered from it. The alternate world helps us notice the real one more clearly, not because the imagined history is better in every way. It would have its own wars, injustices, inequalities, failures, and losses. But because imagining continuity reminds us how much history can change when political institutions survive, when languages remain powerful in public life, and when knowledge is allowed to evolve without first being disconnected from the communities that created it. So let the question rest now. What if the Aztec Empire had survived? Perhaps, after 500 years, almost nobody would call it an empire anymore. Perhaps Tenochtitlan would still be Tenochtitlan. Perhaps its people would argue about the past as intensely as we do. Perhaps the clearest proof of survival would not be an emperor, a temple, a weapon, or a flag. Perhaps it would be something much smaller. A language used to tell a joke. A farmer opening a canal gate. A child complaining about school. A document being repaired again instead of placed forever beyond reach. A city still changing because it is still alive. And with that image, let your own thoughts grow quieter. There is nothing left to conquer, preserve, reform, or decide tonight. Let your body settle a little more heavily into whatever is holding you. The mattress beneath you does not need a constitution. The room does not need a treaty. The night can simply be the night. If thoughts from the story return, let them move past like distant boats on dark water. A flash of Tenochtitlan in the morning mist. A market beside a canal. A 500-year-old page beneath soft archival light. Then let each image continue on without needing you to follow it. History can remain awake without you. Libraries will still contain their records tomorrow. Cities will still carry their layers. Questions will still be waiting. Tonight, you can leave them there. Thank you for spending this time wandering through a history that never happened, built carefully beside the history that did. Let the imaginary lights of Tenochtitlan fade now, one by one, until only the dark lake remains. Then let the lake fade too. Sleep well, and I'll see you next time for another quiet journey into another enormous question. Good night.